think, especially with what we saw today, it raises more questions. There needs to be transparency on that.
Joining us now to break down the situation in Georgia and the legal fight more broadly is Erin Elmore, a columnist at townhall.com, a contributor for Turning Point USA, and the executive director at the group USA Strong. So, Erin, this past week we saw a lot of hearings. That was something that I think stood out to me, but especially in Georgia. I feel like that one caught a lot of people's attention. But I first want to broaden this out and say, what do you think comes next in this Trump legal fight more broadly? I know that they're filing some lawsuits. I know that there's a lot going on. Give us the basics.
Well, look, the clock is ticking. We know we're up against a wall, so to speak. I think the lawsuits are probably the most effective way to reach any sort of conclusion and have due process play out. I think the Pennsylvania cases are very important because we know Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito basically gave a directive to the state of Pennsylvania that was not obeyed. There are some legal experts who say that all of the Pennsylvania electoral votes may be thrown out, but that's not going to change the outcome of the election alone. Right. So there is a lot at play here. And as an attorney myself, what I would like to see is all these various states making sure that their legal teams are whiteboarding this out, if you will, making sure that they're coordinating their cases with each other and communicating with each other so every one case is effective and then creates sort of a whole, if you will, here. Because it's going to take a lot of evidence. It's going to take smoking guns. It's going to take getting the general public, the mainstream media behind all of this. Because right now, the mainstream media is not covering any of this. And I think what's going on in Georgia is helpful because people are actually waking up to this and saying, okay, something's not right here.
I agree with you. I think that the Georgia thing was a little bit different than the other ones because we saw more tangible type of evidence, whether it was video, whether it was exhibits, whether it was numbers being laid out in a way that the average person can understand. Because I think you're exactly right. When we're talking about what's happening in Nevada, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, I cover this every day, and I'm starting to get a little bit blurred of exactly what's happening in each state. So I think that there does need to be a more comprehensive effort and a comprehensive message, I guess, to the American people moving forward. But does that eventually happen if they make it to the Supreme Court, for example? Would all these be consolidated and these arguments be put in a way that is more packaged for the average person? Or is this something that it does have to be done state by state?
Look, the problem is that first of all, we know that the Democrats have been cheating since days of Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall, okay? The Democrats are known to be cheaters. But right now, what they've done is pretty brilliant because it's just enough dribs and drabs here and there to get Joe Biden over the hump so far. But it's not so blatant that there's this red herring or this smoking gun that we're all seeing. And then the mainstream media feels more comfortable icing us out and not sharing any of the allegations. So the average consumer of information has to really dig and has to really find their own sources because it's next to impossible to know what is really going on.
I think that's very well put because, for example, even when I go searching for what's the latest in a lot of these type of developments, it doesn't necessarily give me what I'm looking for. It says the Trump campaign continues to fight the results of the election, things of that nature. That's the angle that you'd expect many of those in the media to take. But I want to know what the progress is regarding the evidence, regarding whether or not the judges are buying these arguments, things of that nature. And I think that's something that we see or are not seeing right now. And I think it's problematic for many people because then they are forced to go off and look up something that may not necessarily be valid, anything of that sort. But we talked to Mo Brooks earlier in this program about how he plans on challenging the Electoral College votes if it were to come down to that. That's what he says that he's planning to do. Can you lay out that process a little bit? Because I know that that's what the Trump campaign is asking too from state legislatures, but there's also a federal process too.
Well, yeah, that's the problem because each state, the legal system has a state system and a federal system, right? Right now we are operating in each individual state. So every state is different. What's going on in each state is different. The cases are different. These are not cohesive yet, as I indicated earlier. Now, the electoral votes, getting them thrown out would be a state-by-state thing. And Pennsylvania has a legislature that is Republican, so it would be easier. So does Wisconsin, I believe. So if you don't have a legislature that's on your side here, it's not really going to work. So these are complicated legal matters that have to be founded on legal grounds, which seems commonplace. And then these cases, these judges, if they're not a judge that's favorable, they'll find any reason to throw these cases out. So we have to be really careful and really thorough. And the more time that passes, the less credibility we seem to have as conservatives. So I do think that, getting this information out to the general public, sharing these cases, getting some rulings in our favor is really going to be helpful. But right now, it's moving slowly. We're only seeing progress,
Yeah.
It's not really a smoking gun, as I'm saying, right?
Right.
So I think it is a slow process here with dribs and drabs. I think these hearings in each state are helpful. I think what we saw, I believe, in Michigan was starting to raise red flags, and we need those red flags. We need people to say, wait a minute, if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, you want to have faith in the electoral process. And that should be something that everyone wants and everyone is cohesive on. And moreover, you notice that you don't see the Biden folks out there gloating, because I think even they know this just doesn't smell right. This doesn't pass the smell test, as we say in the law. They're not out there gloating and thumbing us in, in the nose, because they know that this still doesn't look quite right.
And it reminds me of that metaphor of the frog in the boiling water that is always used in politics, where if all of this information, all of this evidence of voter fraud were to come down at the same time, it would have been bombastic. It would have been something that was talked about by everybody. But you're exactly right. It's something where we have a hearing one week and we see that video, for example, in Georgia that seems to be turning a lot of heads. But it's 2 weeks after the last big bombshell, things of that nature. I think that there is maybe not fatigue necessarily, but the drip that you're talking about. And I think that does come as a detriment to many conservatives when it comes to a messaging standpoint. So I think you're exactly right. I know that you're going to be watching these cases moving forward. We're going to do the same. Erin Elmore, we'll catch up with you in the future. Thanks for coming on tonight.